Hello, welcome back to another episode of Accept, Then Achieve. I'm so thrilled to have my great guest here today, John Lee Dumas. Can you please introduce yourself?
JLD here, aka John Lee Dumas. And yeah, I'm just a guy who podcasts on a daily basis. I launched my show, Entrepreneurs on Fire, 13 years ago, 4,781 episodes ago. I've gotten to interview a lot of cool individuals, both women and men, over the years. It's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot of things. And now we're hanging out here in Nepal at an event that we both spoke at, which was really incredible. Met some great digital nomads, some great locals, amazing people. Actually, my father and I did the Annapurna Basecamp trek, which was 6 days up into the mountains where we stayed at 13,550 feet elevation overnight. You can see, actually, I'm wearing the shirt Pokhara. This is the Fishtail Mountain right here. And we trekked right to the base of it. And it was an amazing experience. My second time in 17 years that I've done it. And I just love Nepal.
Yeah, wow. Oh, John's being too modest. Like got the award-winning podcast Entrepreneurs on Fires with millions of listeners every month. So please go check that out. But anyway, yeah, we're here in Nepal together. It's been 2 weeks since that amazing conference. But we also just had the craziest political protest yesterday where they burned down the hotel right next door to our co-living.
Where the event was.
Where the event was, yeah. And John, any thoughts about that?
Well, it was a crazy experience. So it's one of those things that started off where basically the Nepalese government, they decided to ban 26 social media platforms because the platforms weren't adhering to Nepalese law. Well, Gen Z lost their minds, the young kids, and they said, absolutely not. So they took to the streets, they protested, and pretty quickly, the government backtracked and opened up all the social media sites again. But then the people were like, well, wait a second. We're already out here. We're already protesting. You're corrupt as all get out. Let's just keep the progress going and get you out of here. So then the protests got larger and louder and fires were started and things were happening. And at the end of the day, basically the entire Nepalese government, most of them, not all of them, but a lot of the top level individuals resigned, fled the country. And now we're in the midst of this Nepalese revolution where they're going to be building the country, hopefully from pretty much the ground up, because again, the government, according to all of our local friends here that are Nepalese, is unbelievably corrupt, horrible in basically every scenario, and it's time for change. So we're here witnessing change that's probably going to be in the history books, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, just what an honor, really, to be here. And what a lesson. I would say for my thoughts on that was just really learning, wow, well, the airports got shut down. We were trapped. Many of us freaked out, but then I just, a lot of mental health principles. The serenity prayer, you can change the things you can control, but don't try to change the things you can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. So, and we're still here having fun. We're going to go for
Pool, we got
dinner, cards. Yeah, making the most of it before you head off. But anyway, I wanted to have you on my podcast because what an incredible journey that you've gone through. And I still remember he was a keynote speaker and you were the first speaker. And it just really hit me right in there when you said, like, don't chase success, just chase being a person of value. Don't try to be a person of success. And I was just like, that is the way to do it. It's like we all want to, I think most entrepreneurs, every entrepreneur has a dream of making the world a better place in some way. And I just love that approach. And I felt it intersected really well with my message here with my podcast on achieving things from a place of fully just expressing yourself after you fully accepted yourself and your mission and your life's purpose. So, John, just wanted to start off, just how did you find your way to what you're doing now? I know you had a really cool road.
It was not a direct route by any stretch. But no, I had a great life. I grew up in a small town in Maine, and the first 18 years of my life were very enjoyable. Then I went to college on an Army scholarship. And after that, I spent 8 years as an officer in the U.S. Army, 4 active, 4 in the reserves. I did a 13-month tour of duty in Iraq as a tank commander, so I got to see like what real war was like and what leading men in battle was as an experience, which is obviously something that I'll never forget and had a big impact on a lot of things that I did afterwards, because it gave me something that I think a lot of people struggle with at times, which is perspective. It's like, okay, today's not a great day, but I would be able to look back and say, it's not 111 degrees and I'm in a tank, sweating and getting shot at by people right now. So, I mean, life could be worse. So that it gave me that perspective to kind of go forward. And I did 6 years of what I call struggle. And struggle is not always a bad word, by the way. I look fondly upon that struggle because it shaped me into the person that I am today. I tried a lot of things like corporate finance, commercial real estate. I went to law school for a minute. I tried a bunch of things to just see like what felt right, what tasted good. And that's kind of when I came to that quote that, really resonated with me at that time, which is back in about 2011, 2012, which was, man, like, I feel like I'm chasing success because I'm getting into corporate finance because I think you can make a lot of money there. I'm going to law school because, everybody thinks being a lawyer is a great career. And, I'm going into commercial real estate so I can sell big buildings and really, and I was like, I'm chasing this success, but it's eluding me. What am I doing wrong? And then that Albert Einstein quote, try not to become a person of success, but rather a person of value. And it clicked for me that I was going about it the wrong way. And so when I started saying, what could I do to become a person of value? Looking around at my daily actions, what I was interested in, what excited me, what I was passionate about, but also what I felt like I could become good at, podcasting just jumped out of the roof because I was like, man, I love listening to podcasts, but I'm often finding myself as the listener saying, ooh, I just wish that host would have asked that one question because I really want to know what the guest would have said to that. And I said, well, wait a second, what's holding me back from reaching out to that guest and asking him the questions that I want to ask? And so I kind of looked for a way that I could create a podcast, that I could create a show, that I could create value that would be really impactful to potentially a lot of people. And I crafted the show, which became Entrepreneurs on Fire. And as I mentioned briefly in the intro, here we are 13 years later, 4,784 episodes later, 175 million plus listens later. And I still get to do this, talk to cool people one-on-one, learn from them, be educated by them, be mentored by them, and hopefully be able to give a little bit back at the same time. And it's been a fun journey.
Yeah, wow. And how did you know that that's what spoke to you? You just felt it, just felt right. And you're like, I'm so passionate about this. This is my life's calling.
It's a good question. And how I would answer that is to say that I didn't know. But that's what I think is important about trying, tasting, testing, like getting in there and saying, this might work. Like, this is interesting to me for a number of reasons. Like, I like to talk to people. I like to learn from those that are more educated and experienced than me. Let's try this. Let's try 6 months of interviewing some individuals, some successful entrepreneurs. And if I do it 7 days a week, that's 180 conversations. I'll probably know pretty quick at that point, is this something that I like? Is this something that I'm either good at or at least have the capacity to become good at? Is this something that seems to have some traction that could turn into a business and revenue, et cetera? And so I got in, not really knowing, but knowing that it was worth a try, an effort, and it just clicked. It did work. The traction was there, so I just haven't stopped.
Wow. Yeah, wow. It's just really inspiring to hear that. So it sounds, well, did you ever struggle before with like that fear of failure and that self-doubt, or like many of us may have had that in our upbringings, or you were just always like, whatever, who cares if it doesn't work out? I'll just move on to the next thing to try out.
Well, I'll answer that in two ways because both are true. Number one is, after interviewing so many thousands of entrepreneurs, I have realized that the successful entrepreneurs have an incredibly healthy dose of confidence. They're just confident individuals. They're confident when they succeed. They're confident when they fail. They're just willing to say, you know what? I'm fine that didn't work, but I'm confident that I make this adjustment, this pivot, this move, and now it's going to work, or at least is going to have a better chance of working. So I did go into it with a high level of confidence just because I felt that this was something that could work. But at the same time, listen, all human beings have things in common that are just innate. Like we are going to, at different times in our life, have fears, have doubts, have anxiety, have the imposter syndrome, because it's coded into our DNA. I mean, literally, that's why we're sitting here today, because our ancestors had fear and doubts, and they avoided putting themselves in the situations that would have caused Homo sapiens to go extinct. We're not extinct because we had fear. Just like last night, I wasn't going to go wandering the streets of Pokhara during, a mass uprising where there's buildings burning and people are looting and, buildings are being broken into. I'm not going to go do that because I'm probably going to be safe, but I have some doubt and some fear that I might not be, and why put myself in that risk? So we're all going to have those fears. It's those individuals that surround themselves with the right people. And I always end every one of my podcasts in a very similar way. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If you surround yourself with the right people, just like you're doing at the co-living space here, you're surrounding yourself with digital nomads, with entrepreneurs, with business men and women. And when you're feeling those doubts and fears, you talk about it and they give you support and guidance, and you can do the same for them. And like that kind of community, that kind of mastermind is so important. So yes, I had all of those, but yes, I surrounded myself with the right people to allow myself, when I did have a couple of those days in a row, to come out the other side, and the feelings dissipated and I kept moving on, and it's been 13 years.
Wow. Would you say that's the biggest hack or the biggest thing that makes the biggest difference, having that supportive community? Or what else were the things that made the biggest difference for you?
I mean, definitely having the community, definitely having the mastermind, the other 3 or 4 individuals that I would constantly on a weekly basis be meeting with and talking with and sharing ideas and fears and struggles with. And then having a mentor. Like I hired a mentor from day one, somebody who was a successful business podcaster. Her name was Jamie Masters. She ran this podcast called The Eventual Millionaire. And she had been down that road. So she knew the roadblocks I was going to face. She helped me get through them. She helped me avoid some that I didn't need to go through. And she was a great, catalyst to my launch. And, I'll always be grateful for that.
Oh, amazing. I'm curious how long you worked with her, or just the beginning steps, or
It was 6
all
months.
throughout? Nice.
6 months
Okay.
program.
Got it. Oh, so do you recommend anything that someone wants to do to give it that 6 solid months, or should they give it longer? Because you told me 2 years making content, trying out an idea.
Yeah, so it was a 6-month mentorship program that I had with her that was amazing. And then actually when that ended, I felt like I gotten from her what I needed to. And I actually immediately hired another mentor. And that mentor was with me for the next 6 months. And like that was the next step in my process. I needed new skills and new knowledge at that point. So I found a mentor that could provide that. And that was actually Lewis Howes. A lot of people know him. He has a podcast called The School of Greatness. We're still friends to this day. In fact, he's about to bring his first child into this world, which is really exciting for him. So I'm happy to see that. And that was my next step in the process, because I really do think, if you're enjoying something, if you have passion, if you know you're adding value to the world, and you can see that you have some momentum and some traction, you do owe it to yourself to give it at least 2 years, because it can take that long. Now, again, you got to be having wins along the way, financial wins. You've got to be, locking things down, but to really get things off the ground and rolling, like it takes time.
Got it. When did you start getting traction? Or you said you basically got traction right from the very beginning, like the first week, do you remember?
Well, traction comes in different forms. So the podcast was getting a decent amount of listens pretty quickly because it was very unique, and it was the only daily show out there that was doing interviews of entrepreneurs. So it got traction in that arena, but listens don't pay the bills. So there was really, not much in the way of revenue for the first 6 to 12 months. Like there was some sponsorship revenue here, some mentorship revenue there, but it was very spotty. And it wasn't really until month about 13 that I came up with the idea to launch a course called Podcaster's Paradise. And like that was my real big financial leap, where I went from just kind of trying to figure out how I was going to make, a few $1,000s a month, to now having a course that's generating 5 and sometimes even 6 figures a month in revenue. And Podcaster's Paradise is still going to this day, 12 years later, because I launched it again about 1 year into the podcast. And it's been a fun journey for that. And that was just, again, one example of one, financially revenue generating idea that I came up with early on, that I've then, continued to iterate on. build out more courses, launch books, masterminds, events, fill in the blank. And that kind of comes with the process of continuing to do that thing.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing just these nitty gritty things. I think can help many people who are looking to start their own businesses or ideas here. So I love that you said you stood out by being a daily podcast show. What other ways did you try to stand out, or what other strategies did you use?
Yeah, so that was the really big thing for me. Was I looked right off the bat and I said, what is missing in the business podcasting space? And I really tried to find like the shows that I loved, but what were they not doing to the level that I would like to do personally? Or as a listener of podcasts, what would I potentially complain about? And one of my big complaints was these shows were great, but they were coming out once a week, twice a month. And so I would go through their back catalog in a few weeks, and then I would have to be waiting a long time for that next episode to be released. And I said, man, I wish that there was a show that I woke up every morning before my jog, and I just knew there would be a fresh episode waiting for me. Like, that would be cool. And that became the dream of the show, was I'm going to create something that doesn't exist. And as I shared a lot of my talk here in Nepal, you need to become the number one solution to a real problem in a growing market. At that time, podcasting was a growing market. There is no doubts. How could I become the number one solution to a real problem? Well, the real problem that I saw was quantity. So I said, I'm going to become the number one solution to quantity, because I wasn't going to be the only solution doing 7 days a week. So the day that I launched Entrepreneurs on Fire, it was the best daily podcast in the world interviewing entrepreneurs. It was the worst daily podcast in the world interviewing entrepreneurs. It was the only. I was the only game in town. If you wanted that, you just had to, and you didn't like me, or you didn't like how I was the host, you just had to suffer through my sections to get to the quality of the guests, because that was the only game in town. And another huge benefit, and this is why I always stress quantity to people, was that I was not a good podcast host when I first started. And few people are, if anybody. I mean, why would you be good at something you've never done before? Like, I had never taken communication courses, in college. I had not spent much time public speaking or interviewing people. So I had to learn as I went. But guess what? I put in the reps every single day. I got a little tiny bit better. Where some of my competitors, were doing 4 episodes a month, 50 a year. I'm doing 365 shows a year. I'm practicing, getting a little bit better. So, quickly, I'm actually getting to the point where I'm able to contribute to the podcast. So now it's like even more valuable to the listener, because the host can actually contribute some value to the show as well, instead of just asking questions and shutting up, which is what I did for the first couple hundred episodes.
Got it. Yeah, that quantity, I still remember you said that's backed by research, like that study where they were like, hey, artists, make your pottery. And the group that we're just going to grade you on how many you produce, had also the best
She
quality.
listens very well. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, just everything is a gem that comes out. Like so many people here. I also just want to again share my gratitude that these people who are ahead of you, I mean, they're just humble, great people. We all want everyone to rise.
I mean, I can close
so
my
I love
eyes
that.
and I just launched my podcast. It feels like it just happened. So, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. So, oh gosh, how did you deal with, so what are still some challenges that you're facing? Because again, I just want to normalize that we all still have our struggles, no matter what level of external success that we are. What are these challenges? How are you coping with them? And what were some turning points or other challenges in the past for you that you've overcome?
I mean, challenges are always going to be there. And, we're living actually in a really interesting time right now that's coming full steam ahead, which is AI. I mean, that was a major topic in the event. It's going to continue to be a topic for years to come as AI just compounds on top of itself and just becomes, more valuable, easier, simplistic and to use, and better as an actual tool. So, I mean, those two things are colliding, and you just have to be ready. I mean, for me, there was not that many podcasts when I first launched. So it was kind of easy to rise to the top. Now pretty much everybody that wants to have a podcast and thinks it might be interesting does have a podcast. And that's both a good thing and a challenging thing, because that does saturate the market and makes it for a lot more choices and all of those things. So you got to continue to just, say, how am I going to improve my show? How am I going to improve my business? How am I going to offer different products and services and coaching and masterminds? I mean, I just had a call with my business partner, before we jumped on this interview right now. And, we're doing some really cool things in the coaching space that are really AI driven, that are utilizing a platform that didn't even exist a few years ago. And it's just crazy to see like what my next 6 to 12 months could be, which are going to be completely different than the prior 6 to 12 months, just because of new opportunities that are coming, that are making certain things easier, certain things more difficult, and certain things not even worth pursuing anymore because, of the rise of AI and just other things.
Yeah, just gotta stay afloat in this dynamic ocean that's changing all the time. So just going back, like you said, you were in law school for a hot minute. What was that like trying something, especially since, I mean, if it's okay to share, your dad also was in law. So like, how was that journey? Because, me leaving medicine was really hard for my family. And how did you navigate that? Or were they supportive? They're just like, yeah, do what you love.
Well, it's actually a pretty similar situation where, your parents, I'm sure, were very excited you were going to medical school, and they were like, telling all their friends about it. And, for me, like I had never grew up saying like, I'm going to law school. In fact, in a lot of ways, my father kind of discouraged it. And like, he said, it's a great career. It's been great for me, but, it's also tough and it's not for everybody. So he was never like pushing me into it. But there did come a time like after the military, I went and traveled for a while, and I was trying to think like, what is the next thing for me? Like, what is my next step? And I was really struggling at that point because, it's like the mid 2000s. So maybe it's like 2007, 2008 timeframe. And I was just trying to figure out like, what is the next step? And I wasn't in like the entrepreneurial world mindset yet. I wasn't in the online world, and things were still kind of ramping up there anyways. It was still kind of new and fresh. So I wasn't thinking in that area. And I kind of said, hey, maybe it's time to go back to school. Maybe it's time to go to law school. And that seemed appealing to me for a lot of obvious reasons. And so, I remember the day that I told my dad and my mom that I was going. And of course, like my grandmother at the time was very excited as well, because now she was going to be able to tell like all of her YMCA friends that her grandson's going to law school. And, I took it very seriously. I studied hard for the LSATs. I did really well in the LSATs. I got into a, very good law school and, committed to it. Like I bought a, condo, like in the town. Like I was serious. Like I was going to go through it. And then after one semester, I was just like, this is not the right path for me. And I wasn't bearing it at that point, but I'm just like, not now. And looking back, I was actually dealing with some PTSD from my time in the military, and that was kind of bubbling to the surface in different areas. So it just felt to me like I needed just more time to go find myself. And it's funny, everybody talks about eat, pray, love. It kind of influenced me as well, even though I'm a male, and that's based on a female. But I was like, I'm gonna go to India. So I actually, I did finish my my first semester, and I got my grades, because I'm like, I want to leave the door open to come back to law school. And then I found a couple guys that were traveling in India and Nepal, and I jumped on board with them. It was a 4-month trip, and we did 3 months in India, 1 month in Nepal. I did the ABC trek back in 2008, so 17 years ago. And it was amazing. I loved it. And, I always wanted to come back at some point and do it again. But yeah, it was a journey. And, it's just like, I'm sure it was difficult for you to face your family and your parents and tell them, I'm not continuing forward down that path. It was difficult for me as well. But, you go back at some point to like, you have to have courage. You have to be brave. You have to be, just realistic with how you're actually feeling at the time. And that was what I was feeling. So I ripped the Band-Aid off and disappeared into the jungles of India and Nepal for 4 months. And when I came back, I was a new man.
I I have so many more questions. Okay, well, when was that? But was there a single moment where you were just like, yes, I realized this is not for me, or was it gradual? Oh, first, I'll start with that.
It was kind of gradual. It was like the first couple of months I was really into it. I was going, all in and trying to do my best. And I was doing well. Like I was putting in the effort. I was fully focused. I had no distractions. But one thing I'll say about law school, and maybe this isn't everybody's experience, but it was my experience, is that 80 to 90% of people are really pretty unhappy that they're in law school.
Oh yeah, you said that. Yeah, that's crazy.
There's like the 10 to 15% that are like, you can tell they're gung ho and they've got it. They're in the right place. But most people are like, man, this is just brutal. Because it is, they try to grind you out the first year and the just piling it on and very stressful, classes and environments and all that stuff. So it was more gradual. It wasn't like one moment. It was kind of like a couple months. I'm like, okay, this is it. I remember sitting down the first day in law school and I was like, yes, like this is it. So I went into it with the right attitude. It just slowly faded.
Wow, I think that's worse stats than med school. I don't know if it's 80 to 90% of medical students are unhappy, but it's just hard. Wow. If it's okay to ask about that PTSD from the military, what was that like? What was like? How did you process that? How did it manifest for you? How did you overcome that?
Yeah. So for me, like when I spent 13 months in Iraq, and I came back, I felt, honestly quite fine for my final year and a half in the military, but I was still like in the military, like mindset and still like on a base and like a soldier. So I still kind of felt like I was in that zone of, battle and war and just preparation. And so it wasn't really until I kind of like left and entered like the quote unquote civilian world that things kind of started to bubble up a little bit. And I can just remember, and this is something that I've heard from a lot of people, like when I say it, they were like, oh, I resonate with that. Cause like that to me is exactly what I was feeling as well. Was I grew up like a New England Patriots fan. This is a football team in the NFL. They're a great team. They were a dynasty and they were like having the best season like ever. Like this was the season they were just winning every game by 30 points. And I grew up just loving watching them play. Every touchdown, I'd be screaming. Every time they lost, I'd be devastated. And I just remember watching the game and they were doing great and I had no emotion. Not high, not low, just like nothing. And I'm like, this is bad because I'm an extrovert. I like to be around people. I'm very social. I definitely have emotions. I'm an emotional person, like not overly so, but I definitely am emotional. And I was just like, man, I'm like flatlined. It's like, you see like flatline when your heart stops. Like I was like flatline emotion. It was almost like this, like, it was almost like, how could I ever have cared about this? This is so meaningless. Because like when you see war and you see death and you see like that stuff, like it's hard to like look at a game and be like, oh, that's fun. Like that's exciting. You're like, what is that? Yeah. It was weird. So that's when I knew I needed to get that part of myself right.
So did you kind of process it yourself or did you reach out for support specifically in that?
Fortunately, the VA hospital has, some good psychiatrists and, psychologists and things along those lines and like meetings and groups. So I took advantage of that. But a lot of it was self-processed and a lot of it was self-processing while I was in India and Nepal.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, did you have any interesting, so spiritual, there's a lot of different ways to get to know yourself that first time before you were in India and Nepal?
Yeah, I think it just helped me kind of reconnect with nature and seeing other people that were really suffering because, India's so poor. Nepal is also very poor. And there's a lot of happiness and there's a lot of joy, but there's also a lot of poverty, a lot of suffering. Yeah. And seeing that, not just being surrounded by like everybody driving fancy cars and living in great houses and like worrying about keeping up with the Joneses, like putting myself in the situation of like poverty and disease and, struggles and suffering, it made me realize like, you know what? Life is short. I'm very fortunate and kind of helped me come back, from that abyss a little bit to just really appreciating life and kind of getting back to what I shared earlier with, which was, really having a great perspective on life. And just instead of saying like nothing matters because of what I experienced, now it's like, well, actually, I've seen the worst that I'm probably going to see. Not definitely, but probably. Um, you know, if I compare whatever I'm struggling with right now to that, life is pretty good.
Yeah, it really widens your perspective. And that's why I travel as well as a nomad, just to see these different environment and also to see like it's amazing people can still find so much joy and peace and purpose no matter what their external conditions. So it's just like, wow, there's so much to learn from everyone out there. Well, thanks so much for sharing. I know that must have been vulnerable. Going back to entrepreneurship real quick, do you have any tips for your younger self or for the audience? Maybe biggest piece of advice, and also just how do you stand out nowadays in this saturated market?
The biggest piece of advice I would give to myself and a younger self is like, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Like, people don't really think about that enough, and they don't really look around at their 5 enough and say, okay, I am really speaking with, engaging with, getting mentored by, or learning from these people enough. And a lot of people, when they hear that, they're like, well, like, I I love my family. And, I know that there's some toxicity there, but blah, blah, blah. This is what I hear from a lot of people when I bring this up. And they're like, but I want to continue spending a lot of time with my family. And I'm like, this isn't about taking people out of your life. It's just about ordering your 5, like ordering them. Like, your family should still be there. Your, friends from high school should still be in your life. Like, but they shouldn't probably be in your top 10. Like, your friends from high school that don't have the same goals and aspirations of you, like, stay in touch with them, but you don't keep them in your inner circle so much because, again, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And by the way, I'm in the top 5 for some people, especially that live in third world countries and don't really have a lot of people surrounding them with the same mentality. And I'm that way in the form of my podcast. I've had so many people reach out and say, John, you end every episode by saying that quote, and I just want you to know you are one of my 5 because I listen to your show every single day. I know you. I understand your personality, your interaction with the guests. Like, thank you for being one of my 5. So there's ways in this day and age that we live in to curate your 5, and it's so important to do so. And that's something that I would tell my younger self: focus on that.
Thank you. So true. I heard a great analogy on that. It's like, oh, you have a limited plate. And if you want to stop eating junk food, you don't have to like throw out the junk food, just put more healthy food to slowly replace it. And so that's kind of what came to mind regarding the 5. Yeah. What else? What else? Oh, so I just wanted to hear about how you balance your entrepreneurial journey with your relationship with your lovely wife and now your child. I mean, I know you mentioned she helped you with your podcast as well. So that's awesome that you could be entrepreneurs together. Oh, so sweet.
So one thing that I have been talking about more in the past couple of years than I have been in my prior decade is the word enough. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle because they're always building, they're always adding more. To actually go to your analogy a little bit, they're always adding more on their plate, but they're never taking anything off. And eventually that plate just overflows and the burnout happens because they think as entrepreneurs, they got to build, 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 earn, add, like more employees, more courses, more offerings, more revenue, more this, more that. Whereas for Kate and I, my wife is very level-headed. We kind of got to a point where we were kind of starting to build, and then she kind of pulled back and was like, well, what kind of life are we trying? Are we trying to have 20 employees, 40 employees, 100 employees, or do we want 2 or 3 while we're still making great revenue and having, a low cost of living, comparatively, and just travel and have downtime and really be in control and not be managing people so much as managing our own lives and being able to focus on health and wellness and family and starting a family. And so it kind of got us pretty early on. And by early on, I mean by maybe year 6 or 7 in the business, to really say, hey, we're at enough. Like, we don't want to to let it slide. Like we want to maintain where we're at, but we're not looking to build. And so I would encourage people that are listening right now, like no matter where you are in your journey, at some point sit down and say, like, what is my financial goals? Like, what are my financial goals? Like, what is my dream life? And a lot of times you'll find it's not, you don't need to make as much money as you think you need to. A lot of times when people sit down to it, because you can figure things out. You can live in certain places. I mean, you know this. We're in Nepal. We can go have a great meal right now for $3. Like I'm staying in this amazing resort for $55 a night that includes a breakfast. I mean, I'm not saying that's, no money, but I'm saying that this same resort in the United States would be hundreds and hundreds of dollars a night, like easily. So we have this opportunity in this world to like really keep our finger on the pulse of ourselves and say, these are my financial goals. These are my life goals. These are my health and wellness goals. And you can match those together. And when it comes to like the financial side of things and the growth side of things, you can get to a point where you're at enough. And then you can really still be maximally enjoying those other two buckets that I mentioned, health and family. And so I've interviewed, now that I've been doing this for 13 years, I've interviewed so many entrepreneurs, like in 2012, 2014, 2016, they were crushing it. Like they were doing all the things. They were on this growth trajectory, which they maintained, for a while. A lot of them I've now interviewed for a second or third time because they crashed and burns. And like that business flamed out for various reasons and they had to refine themselves and start from scratch and do certain things. And it's interesting to talk to them because one of the first things they'll say is, man, I had no idea where I was going. I was just doing more and more money and more employees and more this and more that without ever having a specific goal. A SMART goal: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound, SMART goal. And they'll never make that mistake again.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool to hear. Yeah, I know it's really, that can be a trap of its own. You leave the 9 to 5, you leave the general brainwashing, but you still keep that same pattern of like going for more and more and more without stopping that all autopilot to just think about what really matters to me. So that's really great. And I don't think you mentioned you live in Puerto Rico, and that's just living in paradise every day is amazing. Related to that a little bit, just how was it working together with your partner, like to be both business and romantic partners? What is that like?
Yeah, first off, I will say about Puerto Rico, it's an amazing island, lovely people, great culture, beautiful. Pros and cons to everything, though. I mean, it gets really hot there. A lot of people can't deal with the heat. So, you've got every place in the world kind of has their own like kind of form of paradise. And, we just make sure that, when it's summertime, we're traveling to where I'm from in Maine and where she's from in San Diego. And then we kind of go back during the winter season, which for Puerto Rico is like the perfect summer season. Weather-wise. So it is a great place. We definitely love the island. We've been there for 9 years now, and it's been a cool experience. When it comes to working with your partner, with your spouse, it's definitely something where we decided early on that there was going to be a time that we cut off work, and that time for us was typically when we sat down for dinner. And from dinner until bed, there was no like, oh, did you end up doing that one thing? No, like that wasn't allowed. Like you were going to talk about that tomorrow morning. Like sometimes I was thinking about something and I'm like sending her an email like off to the side because I want to remember that. But I'm like, I'm not talking. So separating church and state. Like you separate work and relationship. The intermix can't really happen in our relationship. It would not have worked. So we were really good at that. Kate was fantastic at that. And I got good at it over time. And we just maintained that. And now she's, a mother and she's very focused on that. And she's still working in the business, but on a much kind of more scaled back version. We kind of call her like the nap time CEO, where she just kind of puts in like an hour and a half of work during Bo's nap time and she gets done what she has to get done. And we keep moving on. But that separation is the key. It's the biggest key.
And that's so hard, even just if you're not partnered, just to stop working on something that you're so passionate. It's fun. Yeah. So, right. Exactly, exactly. Oh my gosh. Thank you for all these pearls of wisdom. I wanted to just get it on recorded here, just what you said about making that really specific avatar, number one solution to the problem. That's kind of how people can stand out in the saturated market, would you say, or are there other tips for that?
I mean, to go into your avatar question, I mean, that's what I see as people's biggest mistake. I will ask 100 people in a room, and 99 people will not have a great answer for who their ideal client is, for who their perfect customer is. And if you don't know the answer to that, like, what are you building? Who are you building for? I mean, who are you attracting? Like, probably the wrong people. That's or no people, because you don't even know what you're just kind of throwing things against the wall, hoping they stick, and they rarely do, because there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of craziness out there. So sitting down and getting very intentional about crafting who is your avatar, the perfect listener for your podcast, the perfect consumer for your product, for your service, the perfect client for your coaching program. It's one single person. And then you create content for that person, for that individual. Like, that's how people can start to wake up every morning and start creating the right content to attract the right people to their business.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And then one of the last questions would be something I'll take from your interview question. Just if you woke up the next day and you lost everything, except you still had your memories and your wisdom, what would you do?
So this is a question I asked for the first 2,000 episodes of my show. I haven't asked that question in about 5 years,
Oh,
because it's been that long since I've had that format. But essentially, it was the full question was close to, if you woke up tomorrow morning on a deserted island and you had $500, but you had no knowledge of anybody else that was on that island or the businesses that were there. But you had all of your skills and experience. What would you do to get the engine rolling, to get your entrepreneurial spark flowing? So that was a question I asked 2,000 people. I got some really interesting answers.
yeah, that's why I was like, has anyone asked you?
Yeah, a lot of people.
Okay. All right, I will listen to that other episode then. You don't have to answer here.
But basically, I'll answer it initially, and this is what I think is going to be really valuable to a lot of people, is I would walk around talking with people on that island, and I would just really be having genuine conversations, but I would always be asking them at the end of that conversation, like, what are you struggling with right now? Like, what is your biggest challenge, your biggest obstacles? And a lot of people's challenges aren't going to be in your sweet spot or something that you want to tackle, and that's fine. But you're going to get some themes of some that are, and like, that can be a place to start, which is going back to, now, how can I create the number one solution to that problem in that growing market?
Gotcha. Thanks so much. All right. I think we're out of time or over time, but thanks again, John. Any last words you want to say? How can people connect with you and find you? And thanks again for being a great guest here.
Thank you. eofire.com is my website. That's the headquarters. That's where all the magic happens. Entrepreneurs on Fire is the podcast. And the last thing I'll say, just kind of circle back, is be confident. Just be confident, wake up, create something with confidence, always with that focal point of becoming the number one solution to a real problem in a growing industry, and stay consistent.
That's so true. Sorry, and I sneak in one extra question about that. Just how do you, like, the times when you didn't feel confident, how did you root back into that confidence, like that unconditional self-worth, or remind yourself that you're enough?
By those 5 people that I surround myself with. They are my support group. They are my confidence builders, and I'm there for them when they're lacking confidence and when they're going through difficult times, and they're there for me. It's critical that you have your mastermind.
So true. And your community. It's like everything in this world is all about relationships, and we can't do anything alone, always with others. Thanks so much again. Super appreciate it. Thank you. Maybe have you again. Another time.